I really think the starting point is to just have an idea and to be passionate about something. I really feel that a lot of the time it's almost information overload if you're looking online. And so there are tutorials and of course there are free resources. I would recommend if you are stuck in terms of technical things, looking on places like Screen Skills, and both the Nerve Centre and Northern Ireland Screen do offer training, as well as, of course, fantastic places like Accidental. But I actually think it's to start with basics and to think of something that you're interested in and a topic or an issue. That can then become a drama or a documentary idea. But you have to start with thinking about, what do I care about? What do I want to say? And really then you can pick up the next steps and the technical things after that. But a lot of the time, it's really thinking of what angle you want to take on an idea before you actually move into thinking, how am I going to pick up a camera and frame this? And how am I then going to piece it together? So that would be my main advice, and actually to ask more questions of your peers and people that you may know in your personal life and in your professional life, because you'd be amazed at the sort of inspiration that may come just from everyday conversations. That's something that I really feel very privileged to have access to with working with so many community partners. Day to day, I'm always learning from the rooms that I am in and the kind of ideas and the chat around me. And even if it's subconscious, there may be something that you've kind of experienced in your own life that will then form an idea. So really, I would advise starting by just having conversations with people around you and starting to think about what you're passionate about and how therefore you could make that into an idea which could become the genesis of a film. It's difficult to interrogate a topic if you are unsure about it yourself. So my advice would be always do background research, out and about, chat to people who are experts, whether this is to develop a fictional character who may have a particular set of experiences, or whether this is to actually make a documentary around an issue. If you're on the ground thinking about it and talking to relevant people and maybe bringing along your phone to start doing some test shooting, you'll start to learn what's maybe working and what maybe you need to actually research more. If there's gaps in your knowledge and maybe gaps into the sort of level of research around a character, around an idea for a film, that will become apparent when you start to try and develop it into a short film project or even a longer form thing. If you've done the work in the pre-production phase, I really think it means that you can be much more relaxed when it then comes to shooting. And I know it's so tempting to rush in and try and film everything in a day, but you'll start to realise that you'll actually be saving yourself time and effort in the long run if you've done that pre-production research and work. And that's why I say have plenty of conversations with people that may provide insights into whatever your film project is. If you are trying to think about older people's experiences in Belfast, meet with groups who come from that demographic and just chat to them about their experiences and see how that may take shape for a character or for a plot line or for a documentary. And that way, when you come to actually shooting, you'll have a much clearer sense of what your approach may be to unpack that kind of idea. I think it's really easy to develop an idea and maybe be very happy with it on the page. And then when it comes to the process of bringing that to life in a film, it can be really challenging and it's easy to just sort of lose momentum. Every film project is a group effort and really is something that you need to work with others on. And so that can mean that there are levels of conflict, there are differing approaches. There are always days when it maybe feels like you're at loggerheads with other people you're working with and that you haven't made any progress. My advice would be, instead of to kind of throw in the towel at that point and think that something is just not worth pursuing, to take a step back from it and actually maybe do something else creative. So if it's been that a day on the shoot where you're trying to film has not gone well, take a step back, take a walk, go into a different context where you're maybe not looking at screens, not looking at cameras, and have a think through what you actually want to achieve with it. A little bit of space and time away from something where you're maybe out in nature or doing something else creative, you're maybe drawing or you're going to a class or learning a language or some other form of outlet, can often maybe enable you to work through a little bit of the conflict. Then you might be ready to go back and actually just have a conversation. I'm a really big believer in working in a kind of non-hierarchical way with people where everybody's ideas can be brought to the table. That can mean that maybe there's differing approaches and people have to reach a compromise. And, you know, everybody brings an ego to the table and that can be challenging. But if you have taken a little bit of a step back and you have that distance, and you then kind of maybe know the questions you want to ask of other people you're working with, that can be helpful in then enabling you to reach a compromise that you're happy with, and actually to probably learn something about why you maybe felt resistant to a different approach and how you can actually incorporate a different working methodology into what you're doing day to day. So it's easier said than done, I appreciate. But if you even have a day wiggle room on your shooting schedule, it may help massively to just take a day out and say, right, we're going to regroup and we're going to think about a new strategy going forward, rather than trying to rush through things and nobody's satisfied and then it does feel like you kind of aren't happy with the end product. Better to sort of spot that earlier on and try and nip that in the bud and reach a compromise as soon as you can, would be my advice. Something I do with groups and we take into kind of workshops is to just think about your planning techniques and what maybe suits you best. Some people are really visual thinkers, and so a storyboard can be a really useful tool. Again, that doesn't really matter what type of short film you may be making, whether it's documentary, fiction, or interview. I think having a visual map sometimes of shot by shot what it may look like is a really useful guide that you can then follow, and it may be then clear what kind of camera angles, what framing you want to go for if you're sketching out shot by shot in a storyboard. Some people may prefer to note things down, and when they've written it out, it becomes a lot clearer for them. And if that's the case, then yeah, I really would advise just bullet pointing a structure of an interview or bullet pointing a structure of a scene before you even go into a more detailed script or writing process. Have everything that you would like included in one place, and then you may be able to start to kind of strip that back and sort of edit your own ideas and finesse them from there. For myself, I would say my strengths in projects lie probably in directing and then actually in post-production and editing. I've probably worn various different hats across projects, done cinematography and done other things, but my main concern is always to put other people who are in front of the camera at ease when it comes to being on set. And so if I had a top 5 checklist or just my main kind of things to tick off, it would be to actually sit with someone, reassure them that they are comfortable, they know what's going on, to ask them if they need anything, to check what approach, if it's an interview, suits them best, where they'd like me to be positioned, if they have anything they definitely want to talk about that we haven't discussed or pre-planned, just to make sure I can work that in. And then to check in with the other crew about the setup and, of course, to make sure that we have everything technically we need. Are things charged? Do we have access to spare equipment if we need it? Is there anything that anyone's worried about? So I really think it's about speaking to everybody who's on the set with you, because it's easy to get tunnel vision and to maybe be worried about your job on the day. But if you're working, especially most of my projects have been quite small crew in documentaries, if you're working with a small group, you really need to make sure that everybody else in the room feels encouraged and knows what they're doing. And then you know that things are going to hopefully run a bit more smoothly. So it's almost a little check of going around with everybody and probably prioritizing the talent, as it's called, whoever's in front of the camera first, checking that they feel comfortable, and then going around and checking with everyone you're working with. I think when I was younger, I really wanted to throw everything at every idea, which is great. And I suppose it's good to have that enthusiasm. But my advice to my younger self would be to try and simplify and to focus on one theme or idea and do that well, rather than maybe having 5, 6 things going on in one project that then it becomes a bit unmanageable. And that sort of refers back to that sense of if you feel like something's not going well, it's really easier to just maybe say to simplify. And what was it, that fashion analogy of Coco Chanel or someone? Before you leave the house, take one thing off. Perhaps you can apply that to a kind of filmmaking strategy as well. Look at what you've got, maybe take out one thing, and then think how you can simplify and move forward with it. I'm really passionate about working on ideas and perhaps with people who aren't often centred in mainstream media. And I try to utilise and adapt more radical filmmaking processes into what I do. And that can mean working on smaller budgets, which can be frustrating at times and it can be challenging. But actually what I find exciting about that is the freedom, and it enables you to kind of work with a small group of peers and approach a subject in the way that both yourself and the people on camera are really happy with. And I think what I find so exciting, particularly about this kind of style of perhaps more grassroots documentary filmmaking, is that you often can go in with a plan and have an idea of what you might be talking about, but that can be completely turned on its head within a session, and people can bring out stories and ideas that you never would have expected. And so you're never bored. Every day is exciting when you're working with people, and you always have to adapt what you're doing in the moment, which I find really exciting and thrilling, and that's why I love what I do.